everybody, and welcome back to the Aura Fury podcast. We are here with half of the dev team from Vintage Story. But first, I would like to introduce my guest host here, Ashantin. Everyone, say hi to Ashantin.
Hi, that's me, Ashantin.
Thank you. And then on the other side here, our guests today are from the development of Vintage Story. I am joined here by guests Hayden and Luke.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Thank you for welcoming everybody here to the podcast, and we'll go ahead and get started. First off, a lot of people haven't even heard of Vintage Story, so we'll go ahead and throw those out there. What is Vintage Story, and who is Anego Studios?
Well, I think I guess I'll say when I talk to people about it who aren't really familiar with games, I go to the standard, which might be a little damning in this case, but have you ever heard of Minecraft?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're in the similar genre to that. It's a block-based game, sandbox survival. I guess our main way of distinguishing ourselves is that we try to make it as immersive and challenging is not quite the right word, although it is very challenging.
I would say it's immersive and in-depth in terms of
yes.
the game's mechanics. There's a lot of depth to pretty much everything that you're doing from moment to moment, much more so than in something like Minecraft.
All right. And then Anego Studios supposedly is a very small team. So who all's in this? Who all where did it come from?
Well,
I guess
go ahead, Hayden.
It started out as, I guess you would say, it started out as a mod in Minecraft, and I think roughly around the time of Microsoft's acquisition of Minecraft, Tyron and Sarati were like, we don't really like the direction this is going. Let's just do our own thing. And that kind of spawned Vintage Story in the early days as basically just like a standalone game where they decided they were going to do kind of their own take on the genre and do all the things that they, I guess, take the game in a direction that they wanted to see a game like this go. Basically just a sandbox survival game. And from there, quickly, I think the team started expanding. I happened to see something very early on an old TIG source forum post, which I don't know if TIG source is well known these days, but back in the day, it was like one of the go-to places for indie game news. And I just happened to see a post. And the thing that stuck out to me is there was dynamic lighting that was colored, and I thought that was really cool for some reason. And this was like super early dev stuff, so it was like the game was super bare bones except for it's that cool lighting. And I was like, I contacted Tyron because at the time I was looking for game projects to work on, and I was like, this looks really cool. It seems promising. It seems like you really know what you're doing. Can I like join the team? And ever since then, it's been like a slow snowball, picking up traction and team members and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually at around 12 or so team members now. Not everyone works on it full time. And we're all from different areas too. It's all remote work. So some of us are in the US, some in Canada, some all over Europe. I think those are mainly US and Europe. Oh, sorry, North America and Europe mostly.
So, because technically Tyron and Sarati started the Anego Studios kind of by themselves, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I had more questions to ask them, because I would have loved to have heard where did that friction point of where did they decide, okay, what was that deciding factor of no more being by ourselves or no more dealing with it just being a mod, and what the process of starting a studio was. Were you guys part of any of that process?
I think I kind of was. When I joined the team, it seemed like there was maybe a friend or two in the team chat group that were no longer there. So when I joined, I think it was just me me, Tyron, and Sarati, and some like remnants of people who had been there in the past potentially. So I think it was really with me, and then shortly after Luke, that they really actually started becoming like a team besides just a husband and wife couple. And then I think from there they started to realize the benefits of having people working on the things that they weren't necessarily equipped to do in terms of their experience. And as the game saw more success, it made a lot more sense to hire out people who could do really cool things that they weren't expertised in.
Awesome. And Luke, when did you get on the team?
Yeah, like Hayden was saying, I think he and I were the first to join besides Tyron and Sarati.
Okay.
And I was maybe, I don't know, 6 months after Hayden or so.
Maybe less than that.
Yeah.
It's they were talking about story at one point and kind of like determining like, would the game have a story, where might the story go or whatever, and I was like, I know somebody who can do that. So it wasn't long after I joined that I mean, Luke has been pretty much a lifelong friend. I met Luke in high school, and I'm 30 now. So I guess for like I've known Luke for like over half my life.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like a no-brainer to get him on the team if I could. And I don't know that I had much of a say, but I definitely was like, hey, I know someone. Let's see if maybe he would be interested.
I love all these little almost like happy accidents where it's like, hey, I know a person. Hey, I know a person, because that I feel like that's how a lot of passion group projects come together. Because I tell you, randomly finding people is not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is like I was already friends with Luke, so it was like working on the project ever since then has been super fun because it's like I have someone to bounce ideas off of.
So you've got basically, you started with two pairs. You started with Tyron and Sarati, and you and Luke, in terms of
kind of.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting out of it too.
And that was, I always kind of hover around 6 or 7 years ago. I don't really want to do the math to figure out exactly how long.
It was probably the longer.
Yeah,
long time.
I think it is hovering around 7 years. I mentioned it to Tyron the other day, and he actually had the exact date that I joined.
Wow.
Not to the day, but to the month. I can't remember what he said, but yeah, I kind of don't want to know at this point because it's been so long.
Excellent. Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, in fact, it's technically your turn, so have at it.
Many people feel that Vintage Story is a horror game. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I think we try to keep a balance between very cozy and eldritch horror or something. And it's a very fine line to walk, but I think that's something really important to us to try and get both of those aspects covered. So I would say yes, but there's a little more to it than that.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely is like quite the dichotomy to walk. But I think one of the great beauties of Vintage Story is in its customizability. If you want, you can just turn off pretty much anything you don't want to interact with, and then you can have like the coziest game experience you want, or you can just never go underground. I tried for the most part to make the overworld music, like the stuff you experience, not underground. I tried to make it very bright, other than there's one track called Hallowcraft, which you tend to experience more when you are fighting with drifters. At least that was the theory behind it.
I call that the torture track.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit darker than the others. It brightens up a little bit as it goes, but definitely when it first comes in, it feels kind of like a very primitive, spooky drum beat or whatever. And that one's kind of like that one is an attempt to introduce some of the more darker aspects of the game in the overworld. But for the most part, the overworld theme is overworld music is very bright and only slightly hints at other things like that. And that's just another attempt to try to like make it to where the game can be cozy if you want it to be. And the other thing is that there's actually, if you're in the um, creative mode of the game, I can't remember what it's called right now. The soundtrack's a little bit different. A lot of people don't know that, but the more like upbeat or not upbeat, the more, I guess, aggressive, for a lack of a better word, tracks don't play in that mode, and some of the tracks will have alternate versions that are more piano based. So that's just not, it's kind of interesting because throughout the game we have different player bases that we're kind of catering the game toward, and we're having to balance between them. But because, like I said, the game is so customizable, I think it makes it not too difficult of a challenge.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And you can shade the game when you set it up to suit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the shading of the music to the game. I think that works very well.
Thank you.
I think the part I really liked about with the music is because I've noticed it more because we recently did a version that was like the hardcore mode where there's no map and there's no like things are, and we turned down the gravity too. That was a mistake. So we learned very quickly that is very unforgiving. But what I noticed a big thing. But with the music, I actually did notice, like when I'm on the surface, obviously looking around for things, is the music that I'm used to. But then as soon as I started digging into the ground or going into a cave, there was almost like this perfect transition because I had to go into a cave frequently enough that I would notice that exact moment when the over music would stop and transition into like almost like it was silent. And then you would get something darker. And I'm just like, wow, that's nice that it actually catches anytime you go underground a certain extent. It immediately switches the music no matter what you were doing. It could be daylight outside and you had the best track going. And the minute you delved into a cave, even like 15 feet, it changed. And I was like, that's nice attention to detail. That it's basically telling you you're walking into danger.
Yeah. There's definitely there's a lot in the game that kind of determines like what the player is doing and tries to match the soundtrack to some extent. I know that I will design tracks specifically for certain situations. Like there's a track that if you are far away from your base camp, it will have a much higher chance of playing. And it's supposed to be just like an adventuring, I'm far away from home sort of track. There's another one that a lot of players don't know about. If you sit by a lit fire for a certain amount of time, it'll start playing. And then, of course, the underground. The underground is somewhat generative in that it will. There's, I don't know how many tracks, probably like 20 to 30 short tracks that it'll kind of randomize between, so that there's always like this ambient experience in caves. And then there are longer pieces that are like, I don't know, around 2 minutes that it'll sometimes play. And then, of course, there's the general ambience that plays when your temporal meter is getting low. And that kind of layers on top of it.
Yeah, that's frightening.
Yeah, actually, some of that I actually did not make. I'm not sure where it came from. I made some of it, but some of it I didn't. Honestly, I can't remember what.
Tyron made some really early stuff like that.
Oh, did he? Okay.
I think that could be it.
Okay, that could be from Tyron. I'm honestly not sure, and I can't remember which ones I made and which ones I didn't.
While we're talking about Tyron and early sounds, do either of you know how many takes were needed before Tyron got the drifter voices right?
I saw this question, and I don't think either of us know, but it's funny because if you ask him, I don't think he would say he got it right.
That was a new did you know for me, is I did not know he recorded himself with the sounds. That was
moaning horribly. Okay. In your view, what major features separate Vintage Story from looking like, and I quote here, just another Minecraft mod?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones, and this may be my bias here, but I think we have a story to it. And maybe Minecraft has a story. I haven't really kept up with it that much, but I'd like to think we have more than that. We have, flavor text. We have what I tried to do is build the story into the world as you explore. So I think there's a lot more there than most Minecraft clones, if you want to call us a Minecraft clone.
I wouldn't dream of it, but
Yeah, same. Same.
I mean, other than that, I think like we were saying earlier, the in-depth mechanics, I think that would separate us. And honestly, I know a lot of people do a lot of mods, visual mods for Minecraft to make it look better, but I think Vintage Story is a very good looking game compared to many other voxel games like it.
oh, it's gorgeous.
And I forget that until I look at Minecraft and realize, like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in particular in that regard, if you're trying to mod Minecraft, a lot of the times what will happen is you'll get a bunch of different aesthetics that clash because
Yeah.
they're made by different people. But in particular, Sarti has actually been very particular about the art style within Vintage Story. There's a lot of rules in place for what she will and will not allow. I think one in particular is the stretching of voxels. She absolutely will not allow ever, or
Yeah.
not voxels, pixels on voxels.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
Like she will not allow any textures to be stretched, which basically just means that the art style and the size of a pixel stays at the same throughout the game. Another one she is very careful about is round features, because when something is pixel and voxel based, everything is square based essentially. So if you have round features, they can tend to look very jarring. And that's
Yeah.
not to say that there are none in the game whatsoever, but she is very particular about when they're allowed. So I guess cohesiveness and art style and story and music and things like that is definitely a feature. But I also think that Vintage Story is a very different take on the same formula that is, I guess, like the open world sandbox voxel game. I actually wouldn't even recommend Vintage Story to what it seems to be Microsoft's target demographic is for Minecraft, because I think there's a very real age difference in terms of demographic. I think Vintage Story is a better fit for people who played Minecraft in the early days and kind of outgrew it.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think that that's a really big separator between the games. Another one is that just in general, the community and the devs, Tyron and Sarti in particular, I've been amazed at seeing how they kind of fostered the community.
Yeah.
And it's grown so much since, I mean, I remember going in the Discord and they would be like 5 people. And then that 5 grew into like 20, and then that 20 grew into like 1,000 over time, and now it's got all the people in there and like the community. Now I can like go on YouTube and search Vintage Story and just like tons of awesome videos come up, which is so exciting. That's kind of a new thing. And I've been watching Vintage Story content a lot lately, and it's just super great. It's really cool. But oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention that I think kind of separates the game is just the game's engine and mod support.
Yeah.
I don't remember how long ago it was that Minecraft was like, we're going to get a mod API, which for those who aren't tech savvy is basically just a way for programmers to interface with the game itself in a way that works really well. It's very easy to make mods essentially as a programmer. Many, many, many years ago, Minecraft was like, we're going to get one of those so that modding is easy. And then they just never did it. And since launch, Vintage Story has had that, which basically has meant that even in the early days, people were modding the game, which just would not have been accessible otherwise to modders. So there's a great modding community. And the engine, I think, is really well made. And there's a lot being done in terms of optimizing it so that it runs well on most people's machines. It's always kind of a complicated thing because every graphics card's different. Every CPU is different, but for the most part, it runs very well because of the amount of attention to detail Tyron in particular has had, especially in the early days, just like building it right the first time, which in my opinion, the Minecraft engine was not built right the first time.
Really?
Um,
See, I'm
It
not
had to be
familiar.
rebuilt. It had to be rebuilt, didn't it?
so yeah, they had to rebuild it
Oh.
essentially.
Mm.
See, I'm not
Um,
familiar with how Minecraft was originally built, so I don't know what the comparison would be. But a lot of people do rave about the stability of Vintage and how it does just not, it's not super like it's not like software intensive or hardware
mhm,
intensive. So when people are just like, well, what kind of specs do I need? And I'm like, your laptop could probably run it
mhm.
because it just literally does not need an immense amount of space and RAM, and you don't need the top tier graphics card right now to handle it, and it still is a pretty game. You don't have to downgrade, you don't have to drop the quality or anything. And I've kind of raved about how nice and easy it is of a game to just kind of throw onto a computer and play, and you're not waiting 18 hours to download it like some ARC players are.
Yeah, and you don't need to spend a fortune on your computers to play it.
Mhm.
Yep, it's obtainable for a lot of people.
What
Yeah,
neither of sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say that was a big focus, especially
Yeah.
early
Yeah,
on, is just
definitely.
providing that for people. And like I said, there are some exceptions where like very rarely there will be like some weird spec where a specific CPU and graphics card combination doesn't run that well. But also Tyron has done a good job with like when people bring that up, I think in the past he's like ordered specific graphics cards and stuff to try to figure out how to
Mhm.
fix the problem.
Really?
Gosh. Oh wow. You know, one thing neither of you have mentioned is the superb realism behind the rock strata, the ore strata, the way that the metals are smelted, and also when you put two metals together, that the proportions are right for bronze and things like that. I find it fascinating. How did you get it so correct?
I think, in case it wasn't clear, the dev team is a bunch of giant nerds. So I guess just like the attention to detail comes from people just being interested in that detail.
Depending on who you ask, they would say it's not detailed enough.
Yeah,
Oh
true,
gosh.
true. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of geeking out about it, being passionate about these things, and plenty of discussions that we have, and like occasionally heated discussions about like what's the right direction to take this thing, how detailed is too detailed. We don't want things to be tedious, but we also want them to be realistic and to be to some extent a grind, just in terms of like you want it to be rewarding once you're done with the process. um so I mean, I can't speak, I didn't personally do the any design with the metal working, but I just know that everyone on the team brings a lot of passion and a lot of interest in these sorts of things. So that just kind of arrives out of that.
I mean, what's been your favorite part of the game so far, each of you?
Hmm.
I would say for me, I won't say any spoilers, but I think what we accomplished with the 1.18 update is
Yeah.
something I'm really excited about. And I'm excited about doing more updates like that in the future. But in like the non-spoiler territory, I just like the detail of the various systems in the game. I think it's super rewarding. Anytime I play the game, I just enjoy engaging with things in the real world rather than like in a crafting grid for the most part. It's
Mm.
just it's a lot of fun. I don't know. I just like it a lot.
Yeah, I think if I had to say, I would agree the same thing. What we did for 1.18 was very cool. Um, Also very story driven, which I love to do that. Um, and I guess outside of story, one of my favorite things about the game is the world gen as well. And
Ah, yeah.
one of my favorite things to do is to crank up the world height and just explore it and look at all the incredible, magnificent sights that you can see.
That's very true. That's very
That
true.
Yeah, I remember particularly in the early days when a lot of the systems weren't in the game yet. I would just open the game and like Luke said, set the world height super high and just like float around, because it just be in creative mode or whatever, float around and change my movement speed, so I would just zoom and see the craziest awesome structures or like natural structures, I guess, that would appear. It is really pretty.
Well, even without cranking up the world base, some of the world gen is spectacular. It's absolutely
It is.
True. I don't know
Yeah.
how Tyron does it.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Now, talk about spectacular. What were your thoughts when you first started seeing the amazing builds by some of the player base? And was the use of the chisel an expectation of the game, or did it go beyond your expectations?
It's funny. The chisel was this feature that Tyron added for creative mode, and then like just kind of briefly mentioned to the team and then moved on. And the rest of us were like, hey, wait a minute, this is really cool. Like we need to do something with this.
This is casually mentioned. Oh, by the way, I put in a way to reduce a single block
Yeah.
to a 1/64th size, and that's casual.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
Oh, no.
He'll just do something amazing and be like, oh yeah, I kind of did this. Or there have been times where I don't hear about it until like everyone hears about it in a blog post or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that
he'll
does
just add
happen.
something, not say a word, and then I'll read the thing and be like, he added that. That's amazing.
But I think the chisel has been amazing, and it's really accelerated the possibilities for player builds. And there are times when I'll see a screenshot and I'll be like, what game is that?
Oh gosh, it's mine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy the amount of detail you can add to things, and it's stunning. I think once we recognize the potential of the chisel, there was definitely expectations that some amazing things were to come, but that doesn't like stop you from being completely blown away once you actually see someone do something.
Yeah.
Even still, yeah, like Luke was saying, we'll see. So like we have our team chat or whatever. Someone will post something that someone made, and it's just like, wow, I cannot believe, like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
It's just sometimes absolutely stunning.
The absolute hours that have gone into some of these builds too, because I know on the servers that we've hosted, we've had some basically entire cities built.
Yeah.
And with that chisel, it like they would go to the extent of showing like cracks in the drywall.
Yeah.
It's like, who pays that much attention to make sure that you can see the brickwork behind cracked drywall in a house? I was just the chisel has been easily for me the biggest difference between Vintage Story and Minecraft. Even though Minecraft has had a bunch of mods for sculpting and stuff, it's never come to the interface for using the chisel is actually really simple. Once you've got it, it's just a rinse and repeat process. So once you got it, it's not something you don't have to like figure out how to do a new model or something. You just you just kind of throw it together and you can start chiseling. And I feel like once that was implemented, that was the biggest set apart. Like the things you can do now, you can reduce it to where you can just make like little cups, teacups and kettles and stuff and put it on a table. And you can't do that in Minecraft. In Minecraft, it's a set thing that you have to craft. In Vintage, if you literally can get it in your head, you can make it. And I loved that.
It's really cool too, seeing player builds where they'll go absolutely huge with it. And then other ones where it'll just be one room, but a very, very detailed room with some incredible chisel work in it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff that like I would love to add, teacups from our end of things, like a model for it and everything, but we just can't keep up with everything. So it's really cool that players are able to chisel stuff on their own. Of course, the team, we'd love to have that with the functionality of like, you can drink out of it, for example. And that's what slows us down. But it's awesome to see.
Yeah.
If it ever got to that point where I could craft a cup and actually put a drink in it, I would be pretty much blown away because, yeah. Well, because that's just stuff that you dream of. It's not really things like
Yeah.
when you're decorating your house, you're just like, I'm going to make this beautiful, bookshelf. And I don't care if I have books to put in it. And now all of a sudden we can put books in the shelves and we can put like scrolls in the shelves.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That wasn't there when I was originally playing this. So I was
Ah.
ecstatic to see some of that could actually be done.
I find the 1.18 being able to make my own book, write in it what
Mhm.
paintings I've got, then
Yeah.
I'm not
Yep.
constantly having to write them on bits of paper when I go to traders to buy stuff. Fabulous, guys. Fabulous.
I love that feature too. I'm
Yeah.
hoping to do more work with that and hoping to see, I don't know, I'd love to see some like RPG mods down the line if anyone wanted to work with that and like with the new dialogue system we have.
Mm.
A lot of work, but we're also
Yeah.
that's also our job, so we do that too.
Personally, I love the freedom.
Mm.
See, I like the unbounds on a game too, because then it lets you create whatever you want. And if we wanted to make a
Yeah.
city, you can. If you want to be that merchant 10,000 miles in the other direction, you can be.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 We try to let players play it however they want to. It's funny, Ashantin, you're actually one of our inspirations for like I think early on our mindset was like, well, yeah, everyone's got to go underground. And then I think I remember in the early days you saying like you hated doing that. And we were like, oh, well, maybe we should try and allow for play styles for people who just don't want to do that and still enjoy the game and still able to like progress further.
I'm think crazily differently on IT and I can barely get it to work. When I was first playing, I know that Tyron and Sarity used to watch me because I just did not play the game as they expected.
That's valuable feedback for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Well, most people come from a game playing background and I
Mhm.
don't.
Mhm.
And they watch me sort of, trying to cut things down. Reeds was the classic. They thought I'd start at the bottom and I started at the top.
Mm.
And it was very, very funny watching them watching me, if you see what I mean.
Mhm.
And I remember whinging like mad about holding down a quern. And I said to Tyron, I'm going to have to stop playing this game. It's too grindy. And he said, what's your issue? And I said, I'm standing there, keep right clicking on a quern.
Mhm.
And the next
Actually too grindy.
Actually too grindy. Yes, literally.
literally. And the next update, we had windmills and stuff like that. And the quern was automated.
Mhm.
So that's great. Right. Do we move on or shall we continue down this track?
Your guys' call. I could sit here and talk about all the great automation things that have come through because I'll tell you, the querns do suck. Querns suck so much. And the whole idea to me is, okay, now that I've got the quern, what's the next step beyond this so that I don't have to do this anymore? So
Mhm.
finding out that windmills
Yeah.
did
True.
exist, it was like, oh, that's
True.
fantastic. I have something else that I can look forward to now. So
And that's a little bit intentional too. We want to give you a reason to
Yeah.
want to be going further and get the
Oh,
windmill.
absolutely. Absolutely. And the fact that the windmill, when it goes round, it creaks. And all the wooden mechanisms. I love the wooden mechanisms. I don't know who did it, but it was wonderful.
I think that would be Tyron,
Yeah.
probably.
well, actually, some of the animation, I think those might be questions for you later, Luke.
The
Yeah.
mechanical stuff, that's all Red Ram, I think. Either Red Ram or Tyron.
Okay.
They both do great work there. It did occur to me, maybe we should say what we do on the team.
Yeah.
Oh crap. Yeah.
Maybe so.
Okay, go ahead.
So like you were implying, I do animation and animation and story are my two main things, but I help out here and there on other things as well, like design and production.
Did you do the animation for the wolves and the hyenas?
Yep. Pretty much every animal is my animation.
Can I just say they're superb? When
Really?
I first saw the hyenas, you know, my hackles rose, the way they hunch their shoulders and then their heads look up. And I love the wolves. I just love the wolves.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Tyron's getting on my case all the time about, hey, you need to rework these animations, make them better.
No, don't. They're gorgeous. No.
No, and not just that. I recognize them because when I'm running from wolves, I can tell the animation from when they're about to charge at me or if they're just waking up. Please don't change that. I have that memorized.
I would like to hear the bear footsteps before they kill me.
Yes,
I'm constantly being killed by bears.
We're
That
trying to
is a
improve the
thing.
ninja bears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things are just vicious.
Oh,
Everything else, I'm like, I got a solid chance against the bear. It's like, oh well, I guess I'm starting over.
Yeah.
It's just so wonderful though when you like the gazelles, watching them move. You know, how do you even start with something like that when you know, you've got this thing in front of you and it looks like a gazelle? How do you get it to move? Do you watch videos of gazelles?
Definitely watch references. I'm also a big proponent for getting out of your chair and doing what physical imitations you can to get an idea of it.
Oh my God, you're down on all fours, howling like a wolf.
Sometimes, yeah.
Wow.
I think a lot of professional animators will do that too. They'll record footage of themselves doing something and then study it later for reference.
Yeah.
A big thing for the animals is learning their gaits. Every animal has a ton of different gaits, and usually what I'll do is I will work from their footsteps, like where they land on their feet, and then go up from there. Because there's a rhythm to it, and they'll change it significantly from gate to gate. But you can learn a lot just from studying that. And then go ahead.
And did you do the animation on the hens as well?
I did.
God, it's wonderful. My grandfather used to keep hens, and it you know, it's just they look just like his hens.
Oh.
Just amazing. So you start with the feet and work upwards.
And it's a lot of it's something you don't really think about in day to day, but you know, when you move your leg, your whole body is moving. You're pushing something forward, nothing's getting pulled, and everything is in motion. And you don't realize that until, you know, you're animating and you just move the leg and it's like, oh, well, this looks kind of bad on its own.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of anatomy, and it's a lot of rhythm in a way of figuring out how these things move in a natural way. And in a way that like is a continual loop as well.
Yeah. The fish are great too.
I think the fish need some work. But it's hard to animate them. There's not much to work with.
True.
Well, especially with it being such a small creature, you only have so many pieces that you can actually make move within the limits of the game. It's like, how do you make a fin that's like 3 pixels big? How do you make that move realistically? So,
And I actually think they do look pretty good when you just see them swimming around in the water.
Yeah. I mean, I know why I think it's important, but why do you think animation is important when you're developing a game?
I think it brings the whole world to life. Obviously, for the sense of immersion, you know, if the animation is bad, not to, I'll bring up. We all know Minecraft animations are something special.
It's distinctive.
It's distinctive. It is. It's a style. But it's not, you know, there's no immersion there. And I think we actually have something of an advantage of working with voxels. It's pretty easy to quickly iterate on animations. And having more detail in our models, we're able to make more immersive, more realistic animations. And I think it just brings the world to life. I think, you know, you're walking around a forest and you see a rabbit, you know, scurrying away. You see a wolf running at you.
A lot.
Yeah.
And if you, how long does it normally take you to complete an animation project for an animal, say, like the gazelles?
For one animal, I would say it usually takes around 2 weeks to a month. There are a lot of different behaviors that they have, and some things can just take a long time. It can take a long time to get a run animation just right.
I had no idea it took that long.
That's very short compared to most models in the industry, where it's, you know, much more complicated. Although the model creator that we animate in is much less detailed and useful than like something like Blender or Maya or something. But it's still, we can move pretty quick compared to most.
Yeah. So what tools and resources do you recommend if someone wanted to do animation?
I think Blender's a great one to start with.
Right.
It's free, it's very powerful,
Mm.
and there's a lot of resources out there for learning it.
Yeah, yeah. And which was the piece of animation in the game that took you the longest to do?
I would have to say it's probably the Locust. The Locust has like
Something so
I think
small?
it's six or
got
eight
so many
legs. I can't think
appendages.
right now. Yeah, each of
That's
them with different
true.
joints, and they're all moving independently.
Oh my
Well,
god.
actually, they move in pairs, but that one took a long time.
I would never have guessed that one.
Yeah, same. I guess now that I'm thinking about it. So what animals or what references did you use to imitate the movements?
I think that one was a spider, even though it doesn't. I don't think it has the same number of legs as a spider.
No,
I
it
can't
doesn't.
remember right now, but it's the way it the front two legs move like they're walking, and then the back two. This is kind of hard to describe, but it's like the front two are moving independent or moving opposed to each other. The next two are doing the same thing, and the next two are doing the same thing, with the first and the third being paired up so that they're doing
Oh,
Okay.
the same thing, and then the middle one is alternating.
Gosh, and they jump as well, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Yeah,
Gosh.
this is my first time exploring the caves recently, so I just encountered my first group of locusts, and I'll tell you, the arachnophobia did set in. So did a really good
There we go,
job.
spider reference.
Have you met the saw blade yet? That's another one that's amazing.
Oh no, I haven't seen a saw. We just saw my first bell, so I have not seen a saw yet.
That's one of my favorite things to watch is people their first time encountering either the bell or the locusts.
Yes.
The bell was
Yes.
kind of a pet project of Hayden and mine, and yeah, I love seeing people's reactions to it.
Oh, so Hayden made it musical, did he?
I actually no, I don't do any of the game sound effects. But it was, I guess, the concept was between Luke and I, and the bells pairing with the story, as well.
I guess I haven't gotten into enough of the lore yet. I'm not sure what the bell's meaning is supposed to be, but I'll tell you what, you hear that thing a mile away.
Yep.
I love that you hear it way before you see it, and for me that adds just that immense element of the horror that we say that Vintage Story is still slightly horror based. So, all right, I am going to hijack this just a teensy weensy bit because I do want to hear a little bit more on the musical side of things. What software and tools do you use? Because we've gotten to hear about, for animation and stuff. And yes, Blender, because I already know enough little amateur animators that they do use Blender first and, try to branch out to other projects next. But for music, I wouldn't even tell you a sample that I could do. So where would you go for that?
I think I get this question a lot, and I guess I want to explain that to me, I don't think the choice in software is particularly important because at least in the landscape of music, there's a lot of options. Unfortunately, none of the like professional ones are free. There's Audacity, but I don't think Audacity is very good compared to the pro stuff that's out there. I happen to use Apple's Logic Pro, which is Mac only because it's made by Apple. And it's considered one of the industry standards, but I honestly could have started with any of them. If so yeah, I use sorry. So what I would consider essential to making music is just some sort of digital audio workstation like Logic, a MIDI keyboard, which you can get like even a tiny one like this.
Aw.
And this is not the main one I use. This is like my travel one. I'm actually not at my house right now. I'm at my parents' house. But and then so digital audio workstation, MIDI keyboard, and what's the other thing? There's a third thing. Hang on. Let me think about it for a second. Oh, just a computer. Yeah, just a computer. You need a computer for it. That's pretty much it. If you have any digital audio workstation, any MIDI controller, any computer, you can make music. And I think that's what I kind of want to stress for anyone who's trying to get into music, especially video game music. There's not a lot you need. And there's a lot of advertising out there that will try to convince you that you need a lot more. But I think that's all you really need. And the funny thing is, the digital audio workstation I use, the MIDI keyboard I use, and the computer I use, if I could do it all again, I would have chosen completely different ones, but I'm still using the ones I'm using. The digital audio workstation I would use if I were starting fresh would be Reaper. The MIDI keyboard I would use would probably be something made by Nectar, like the Nectar Panorama keyboard. And I would probably use a Windows computer. Being on Mac just has limitations that I often find annoying. But I guess so with this question in particular, something I get a lot, which is very like, it might be a little difficult to understand if you're not in the music space, but people always want to know which plugins I use, which sound libraries, which samples I use, which are basically just instrument sounds, synthesizers, things like that. And there's not a lot I like recommending because I think people often get in this headspace where they feel like if I had more plugins, I would make better music. If I had more synthesizers, I would make better music. But I think it's better to be kind of reserved in that regard and only have like a select amount of things you go to. Otherwise, you run into basically just like choice paralysis where you just have so many options. You're struggling at figuring out like which one do I use, even though they all do kind of the same thing. But there are a couple plugin makers and synthesizer makers that I do feel like are worth name dropping, which are the companies are FabFilter, Plogue, Universal Audio, Sound Toys. And that's pretty much it. Those are the ones that I like actually paid for and use pretty much every time I make a track. And they're just basically effects plugins. And there's no synthesizer that I always go to. I do often use Plogue's Sforzando, which is free, and it basically just lets you play sounds that sound like they come from old video games. I don't know how else to describe it in like layman's terms, but it's basically like really short audio clips that loop. And the reason they're done that way is because back in the day, these cartridges that games came on had very, very limited memory. So they only wanted really tiny recordings for each instrument.
Yep.
So it gave it a very distinct sound. So I use those a lot. And at this point, I have like this template project for the music where I open anytime I'm about to start a new track, I just open the template and it has all the sounds I've ever used in the game. So it's all there for me laid out.
Wow.
Hopefully, I know I probably didn't do the best job of describing that for people who don't work in audio, but hopefully that's at least useful for people who know a little bit about the space, because I do get questions about this a lot. And I think the most important thing that I want to stress in that regard for beginners is don't feel like you need a lot to get started, because a lot of it is just in getting the experience. Once you get more experience writing music, you find that a lot of the plugins and stuff just really aren't necessary. It's just a lot of money that they want you to spend because they're all very expensive.
I bet. And actually, I'm glad to hear that you have. So are they subscription accounts that you have for some of the sound library things that you
I
do?
try to avoid subscriptions as much as possible.
Okay.
If someone is out there and has a subscription model, I will either avoid that company or only buy the plugins outright. I just really don't like subscription services,
Okay.
for a lot of reasons, but I won't get into that.
No, that's fine because I know for music it's not really a huge area for us because with the podcast and stuff we're not necessarily using music too often, which we do, but it's like actual sound music libraries, not sound making library
Oh,
type
right,
thing.
right.
So we do have some subscriptions to some things, and
I
we
think
have kind of
subscriptions
learned
in that regard make sense.
because we're not creating our own. We're just
Right.
to pick from what works and what we think sounds right. But I understand that choice paralysis that you get too, where my husband's just like, do you want this one that has 100,000 different songs or this one that has 800,000 different songs? I'm like, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to get through even half of the first 100,000 that I'm never going to look through 800,000 different songs. So I get the
Right.
choice paralysis thing 100%. And the other thing, I was glad to hear that you, when you're working on a project, that you have all of the same sounds that you've used from previous songs. So I actually like hearing that because that means to some extent you're trying to draw off of what you've already done and try to have like almost either like a theme or you're trying to make some sounds come from other songs. Do you do that a bit? Do you parallel some of that stuff up?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a couple of tracks that actually sample other tracks in the game, or I just like instead of using the sound again, I'll actually take the sound recording and then put that in the track and then manipulate it somehow.
Okay.
So I do that. There are definitely themes that come up a lot. There's like I guess what in my head is just the vintage story theme, which is like a super base. It was accidental. I didn't plan it for it to be the theme, but it happens. It happened so often because I was working off of the same arpeggio. It's just an arpeggio, which is a musical term, but it's basically just like an up and down set of notes, and it's not really even a melody. It's just like an accompaniment, for lack of a better word, that's used all throughout the soundtrack.
Okay.
And anytime I think maybe so the game's opening theme has changed probably at least 3 times over the years. The one that's there right now is a track called Roots, but in Roots, I think it was Roots. The end of Roots is actually the start of what was at one point the first theme to the game.
Oh, nice.
So that was one where I literally just took the end of that track and then copy pasted it into I took the start of that track and copy pasted it to the end of the current one, because I wanted there to be like some thematic thing, where I was using the same theme and like an homage to what was the main theme many years ago, which was at a time when probably most players wouldn't even know that I like am referencing that fact. But yeah, I do stuff like that all the time, and there are also specific tracks that are named after specific story related things, which have themes in them, which I plan on using in the future for story related things, which I am being more intentional about because, like I said, the vintage story theme was kind of an accident.
All right. Well,
Fascinating.
I do find some of that kind of like I don't have music theory at all. I've got the music, skill of a I don't know, a rock. That's about my skill. But I'm a huge fan of Undertale. And Undertale is very well known for its soundtrack and for the development of its soundtrack. So I've gone and watched enough theory-based videos on Undertale that when somebody talks about using like, different melodies from different themes to compose into new stuff and that they have meaning and that they're related, I kind of enjoy that somebody makes some of that stuff very intentionally with the idea that if you understand the story, you understand where the song comes from. And if you understand this character, you know where this theme comes from. And I like when some of that gets tied together really nicely. So like I said, I don't have music theory, but if somebody explains to me, hey, this is where the song came from and what it technically is applied to me, it just feels that much more of a, passion project, that you wanted the music to be intentional and that you weren't just, slapping together a bunch of sounds and hoping that it sounded like a theme of some sort, that you're just like, hey, I want to take that part of the story and give it this part of the theme. And I like hearing that, because then in 20 years, when somebody takes the Vintage Story soundtrack and does a big old, music theory video based off of it, it'll be fun to hear where all the pieces come from, because that's what a lot of games get known for their soundtracks. So
Mhm.
in the future, soundtracks either get, they either get like adapted into real life orchestras and stuff, or people rewrite them into their own themes. And of course, there's remixes all the time. So to some extent, music starts in a game, but then it evolves outside of the game. And I'm willing to bet Vintage will eventually get to that point too, where the soundtrack will evolve outside of the game, and you're just going to be like, "Hey, when did this suddenly get popular?" And
I mean,
I
that
like
would be
it.
awesome.
Yeah.
I will definitely say in that regard, there's definitely stuff like that going on. In particular, there are certain tracks that don't play in the game soundtrack. You just find them as Resonance Archives, and they say the ones in particular I'm talking about have Resonance Archive in the name. I think that's the name we went with. But they are specifically story related, which is why they don't necessarily, like, they're telling something about the story. There is one exception, maybe more than one exception to that, which is a track called Mirror, and it's called Mirror because it's supposed to be kind of mirroring the way that a player might experience the game, in which it starts out very bright and happy, and then it's kind of telling a story of like kind of what happens as you begin to experience the underground. So so I definitely I will admit Undertale is a soundtrack I also enjoy very much, and I've also seen some of those analysis videos in terms of like theming and stuff like that. And I also love when games do that, and it's something that Vintage Story has, and I hope it will have even more of in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm also thanking you for not making the soundtrack sound too 8-bit tracky. Because there's
Yeah,
so
I definitely
many, like 8-bit's okay, but it has like, even after a while, it all starts to sound a bit the same. And Vintage got as far away from that as possible. It actually feels like I'm just listening to some, like, I don't know, what would you almost, like a low beat type thing rather than just a Minecraft soundtrack. So I think you've done a really good job getting away from the 8-bits.
That's great to hear. I know what you mean, and I'm definitely trying to strike a balance where if things sound too realistic, it doesn't really fit the game's aesthetic, which is still pixelated, and voxely and squared off. And I think a lot of composers tend to go toward that 8-bit stuff because 8-bit in a way has a squared off sound. Like there's literally a waveform called a square wave.
Really?
Which is basically like a sine wave is very curved like that, but a square wave is like that's what it looks like if you look at if you look at it, and I think it's called an oscilloscope, and look at the waveform, like that's exactly what's physically happening, which is, I don't know, the sound is so weird, but yeah, it's literally a square wave, and people will often use that to like represent like a squared off pixely thing. But I'm really glad to hear that it's not too far in that direction or anything, because there's a tiny bit of it for sure. And like I said, I use those sound samples and sound libraries that deal with those really short sound samples. So it definitely it still has like a, to me, 90s vibe. But I also use more modern sounds, especially when I'm using like pianos and strings, things like that, when I want to capture something a little more modern sounding. But yeah, it's good to hear that it's not overly 8-bit or anything, because I have worried about that in the past for sure.
No, definitely. To me, I can't compare Vintage's soundtrack to anything else. If somebody was just like, "What's that music like?" I'm like, you just kind of have to pull it up and listen to it, because you can't compare it to like a full orchestrated mess. But you also can't really compare it to Undertale soundtrack, because Undertale to me is very much the epitome of the 8-bit, just masterfully done.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Minecraft is very well known for its 8-bit tracky sounding type stuff, but having, to some extent, classical themes attached to it. So everybody's different idea of music. I'm just like, no, I'm not even going to compare it. Just go listen and just go from there. I don't have enough of a background to explain why the music is so distinctively different, but it is. It definitely is. All right. I am going to come back to the story though, because we keep kind of referencing the story, but I know we also want to try to avoid the spoiler part of it. So I'll leave that up to you guys' discretion. But the idea for the story coming along here, and especially with the newest update, because yes, some of us have gone and explored the new story aspect that got updated, and I think it is brilliant and huge. But where did a lot of these ideas come from? And I'm kind of throwing it both of you, because it sounds like a little bit of the dev team works a little bit together on some of this.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think our dev team, everyone sort of has their own focus, but we do, you know, talk a lot, and no one, well, maybe just me, most people don't get to just kind of do whatever they want, and I don't either. I'm joking. But the story was initially Tyron and Sarati's idea. They had an idea in mind when they brought me on, and I'm being intentionally vague about this, but
That's okay.
They brought me on and said, you know, hey, this is what we want. Can you, you know, grow this from here and detail it and stuff like that. So so that's what I did, and we have a lot more plans for the story in future updates, and we want it to, right now it's mainly a thing in the past. You're exploring, you're seeing what happened, but we want to eventually get to a point of what's happening, and what the player, giving the player a more active role in it, instead of being just almost an archaeologist of just uncovering what's going on.
Yep, I get that feel a lot going through the game, that I'm just discovering pieces as I go. And a lot of people, when people ask, do you get answers? I'm like, not really. You don't necessarily get answers. You get clues, and you can kind of piece some of it together, but I've never been able to piece together an actual answer to what has happened. So if that's intentional,
it is intentional.
That has been done really well.
One of my biggest influences for the story is Dark Souls, which is another thing that you don't really ever get clear answers. But I love the way the story is told through just playing the game. And I hope we aren't as vague as Dark Souls down the line, but I'm very intentional about not confirming or denying any theories that people have. I love to see the players come up with different stuff, and if we did give them answers, I feel like it would be a little less interesting, at least at this stage. Maybe when all's said and done, I can actually say what it's actually about. But I think by that point, people will figure it out anyway. If anything, I think I've heard a lot of developers say this, but it's like one person coming up with stuff versus thousands of people all working together to come up with theories. Eventually they're going to figure it out, and there's just nothing you can do about that. So and that's okay. It's fun to see that process happen.
I think that's also kind of exciting too, though, because half of the fun is trying to figure out the story for yourself. And if somebody does just give you answers, you're just kind of like, but what about this? And they're like, nope, that's not the answer. And it kind of kills the creative process for the player base, which is just as important as your guys's, because at the end of the day, in Vintage is it's going to eventually stop, even though I know that sounds kind of disheartening that all projects eventually stop. And when it does, that means it's going to depend on the player base to keep creating, coming up with theories and ideas and stuff. So I think you've done a nice job laying at least a really good foundation for a fun story to kind of keep building on. But while it's still going, what are the challenges of updating this story as it's already been created in the game? So is there stuff you want to put into the story that you're just kind of like, oh, but darn, I have this in here, and that means that has to change. So how do you kind of keep your almost canon storyline? How do you keep that consistent?
A lot of stress. It's just I have to go very slow with story development. There's a lot of okay, this would be cool. Let me think about all the ways that it might interact or contradict something else. And that does cause me to develop the story very slowly. And it also I have to be checking in with the rest of the team. Sometimes someone on the team will have a really cool idea, and I hate to be that guy, but I have to be like, I don't know if that's gonna fit with what we have. And usually we can find a compromise between that. But yeah, I mean, we keep a big, what's generally in the industry called a story Bible, where you have all of the canon information and all of the characters and that sort of thing. But it's just something you have to constantly be thinking about when you're coming up with new story work, is how is this going to interact with what we have? And obviously you want it to interact. And I think I want to avoid retcons as much as possible, but if it comes down to it, we will do that when we need to. I don't want to do that because it's sort of a betrayal of the player's trust. But if it's really, there's there's one thing that's just holding us back, and we didn't think about it 7 years ago, so
yeah,
that's something that we might change.
Oh, Lord, I'm thinking of Dallas, where you wake up from a dream.
I think the game also has, maybe this isn't fair to say, but because the game's in early access, there's some suspension of disbelief that I think is allowed in terms of the game story being updated in the future.
There are features missing that you just kind of, people are coming up with theories based on stuff that we just haven't been able to implement yet.
Oh, that's true as well.
Sorry, Hayden, what were you saying?
I can't remember, but yeah, there's something else I wanted to mention, which is kind of just like a funny side effect of the way the team works, which is that unfortunately for Luke, the way that things work is anyone can kind of suggest a feature that accidentally has implications on the story. And sometimes if it's like a really good idea, Tyron might be super excited to implement it. And so Luke could like potentially come back to the chat and see that Tyron's implemented something that has story ramifications.
Oh, yeah.
No. Things can move very quickly.
Yeah, especially when there's excitement. Things.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's something that Luke has probably had to deal with quite a lot in terms of trying to keep the story consistent. But I think he does a really good job of finding ways to work things in a way that actually like works.
Yeah. Well, may I ask, how difficult is it to hold to your vision of a game when you have a large number of players wanting to influence it to what they want? There are tribes now playing Vintage Story, and you can see that different tribes want different things. How hard is it to hold to the sort of central vision on central story?
It's definitely a struggle. It's definitely something that we're aware of and we talk about fairly frequently. There's a balance I think we try to strike between giving the players what they want and then making sure we're making a game that we want to play. And I think that's something we're very cognizant of and are often asking the question like, okay, well, who are we doing this for? Is it just like, is this going to be a feature that's going to get us more sales, and is that the only reason we're doing it? And if that's the answer, maybe we should focus on something that we're more passionate about, or that I don't know, we think the players we already have would really like, or something like that. But it's definitely something, it's hard to keep that vision in mind, and at the same time it's okay, I think, to share that vision a bit. Players are along for the journey with this, and they should have their input heard. And we do read all the feedback and we read all the suggestions.
Oh my gosh, there's
as many as we can. There's a lot. Yeah.
I think that's actually something, again, that Tyron and Sarati, I'm blown away by how well they seem to still be able to keep up to date in terms of like what players are saying. They watch so many videos of people playing the game through the like first playthroughs or 100-day playthroughs, or like long time content creators who've been playing for a long time. They seem to have a very good idea of like what every different sort of section of the player base, like what their idea of the game is, where they want it to go. I don't know how they do it. But they're very, very good about that. And I think for me, it's like everyone has an idea of where they want the game to go, and that includes me as well. So there are definitely things for the game that I want to see, and that I guess I will be an advocate for in the future. So in that regard, it's not difficult for me to have a clear vision of like where I want the game to go, but then I will see really good suggestions that players make, or I'll see like someone bring up something. I think Ashantin's a really good example of like us seeing how a player might engage with the game in a way that is not expected. And I think that it's really important to change your vision of the game based on things you didn't expect, or things that come up that players arrive at naturally, that's like novel in a way that the game should be accommodating towards. So I don't know. There's a lot of excitement in thinking about the direction that the game could go, and a million different ways it could go. So I don't know. Whenever I think about it, I'm mostly just filled with excitement for like the possibilities.
Well, I find each update very exciting. I find the 1.18 one really, really exciting. I think you did a great job on that. So I mean, it's great. When you add somebody new to the development team, does it change the dynamic? And how do you make sure that whoever you're adding is sort of in line with your processes, your thoughts, your vision?
Must be quite the interview process.
It definitely does change the dynamic, I would say. And that's usually a good thing. It can be overwhelming if we have, a bunch of different voices speaking at the same time about a given feature or something, but usually people bring their own perspective, and it's a valuable perspective. I guess in terms of bringing people onto the team,
I definitely think it's something that over time we kind of iterated on, and we made some mistakes early on that I guess wound up in people working on the game only for a short period of time. And oftentimes it's nothing personal or anything. It's just like the way they work is different from the way everyone else on the team works, or their vision of the game just isn't quite in line with everyone else's vision, in a way that's not really compatible. So in that regard, there have been times where we've had people on the team only for short periods of time. But overall, I agree with Luke that typically, and especially now that we have learned from past mistakes in terms of who we bring on board, the dynamics tend to be better over time in a way. It feels, I don't know, in a lot of ways, it feels like a group of friends just coming together to make something cool.
Oh, that's how it should feel.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think that's another way in which Tyron and Sarti have done like a superb job in just like building a team that feels like a very collaborative environment where everyone has kind of the final say in their own realm, and also is allowed input on things outside of their realm. So everyone kind of feels heard. Everyone feels as if they're still getting to do the thing that they want to do in the game, and in the way that they can most valuably contribute. And I guess I'll say, like, from the music perspective, I think my Vintage Story is my best soundtrack because of the creative freedom they've allowed me to have. I never feel like restricted by some weird arbitrary thing that they're feeling. And anytime that they've requested changes, it's pretty much always been like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's a really good change. Or it ultimately winds up making the music better. in some way or another because of there was one in particular, this wasn't Tyron and Sarti, but we have someone on the dev team that is, I guess, substantially younger than me, and they can hear higher frequencies that I can't hear. And there was apparently a track that had like super shrill high frequencies that I just couldn't hear. And he was like, could you like take off some of the high end of this track? It's really hurting my ears. And I was like, did not even hear that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
And I think it's something like once you hit roughly 20, you're the highest frequencies, you start to like lose your hearing for them. Like in the anything from like 16,000 kilohertz to 20,000 kilohertz is like the range of human hearing is 20 kilohertz to 20,000. And I think like once you hit 20, you start losing 16,000 to 20,000 kilohertz hearing. So I can't really hear much above 16,000 at all. So yeah, when he was like, yeah, you need to remove this, there was actually some objection. Like people were hearing what they heard as the highest thing, and they're like, no, I like that high thing. And I was telling people, no, like you're not, I promise you're not hearing this because I'm not hearing this.
Being heard.
Yeah. So once I finally cut it out, everyone's like, oh, okay, I don't hear a difference, except for that one person who was like, thank you so much.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
What a crazy situation to come across where literally somebody heard a frequency that was like it's imaginary to the rest of you, but you have to figure out which frequency it is. Oh my god.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny situation because I was kind of like having to advocate for them because everyone was like, no, I like the high frequencies. And I was like, even I can't hear them, but I promise they probably are there. And I got it worked out to where everyone was happy, but it was a funny situation for sure.
Well, I have a funny thing with bees. I hear bees everywhere. I can always find bees. Wherever I can find bees. And other people saying, how do you find bees? And I think
that's really interesting.
How do you not find bees? You know, I mean, half my videos, I'm going through a forest saying, oh, there are bees here, there are bees here. I can hear the bees. Oh, there they are. They're the pixels. Did you do the animation on the bees, by the way, Luke?
No, I think they're done.
They might be
a different
programmed
way.
in.
Yeah.
Like just path following.
Oh.
I'm not sure. I think the bees are so funny though, the little beep they make.
Oh, they're gorgeous.
Oh, when they sting you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've not found bees yet, but when we did come across bees and I started getting stung, the sound that they made, I was laughing. Like I was dying, but I was laughing through the whole thing. I'm like, that's the most ridiculous sound I've ever heard.
It's very ridiculous.
But there are
I don't know how we arrived at that sound.
There are some things that seem like happy accidents, aren't there? I mean, I believe, and please, you're the devs, forgive me if I'm wrong, but there's this absolutely fabulous supermoon, and we now have blood rain. And I believe that supermoon was an accident, but the players loved it so much they left it in.
I think
and the red rain is the same.
Yeah,
I think that's correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the moon, but the blood rain was an accident, I think. And now I guess is it considered maybe rust rain?
Yeah, it's great.
Something like that.
Oh, that makes sense. Because then it fits with the story too.
Yeah.
I think once it was like officially implemented as a feature, that color was changed to be a little more orange for that reason.
I do hope, are you going to continue adding magic? Because things like, you know, the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights, the beautiful, beautiful fireflies. I mean, there are so many little touches that aren't particularly useful, but the beauty of them is superb. I hope you're going to keep doing that. Do you think you will?
Tyron has a love for what's called shaders in programming, which is basically just like a way of saying things that make games look good.
Absolutely.
He loves working on anything like that that's related to graphics and just making things look shiny or bright or colorful or glowing, things like that. So I think the chances of that are extremely high, because I think it's anytime he's feeling burnt out on working on the game, he kind of just winds up working on those things.
Shiny gold blocks.
yeah, just like any shiny sparkly thing, it's like that appeals to him in moments where he doesn't want to work on anything else, which
but I think
it's great.
Brilliant. Yeah. If you're stuck on something, go for the beauty. I love it.
So yeah, I feel like the answer is for sure more of that will be to come.
Mm.
All right. Then I guess the last thing I really have been bugging to ask about this, so maybe this is gonna be a question for Luke, but during the temporal storms, the more recent edition has the great beast in the background. Did you animate him?
I actually didn't.
Oh,
That was Anna, who's one of our artists, our 3D artists. I was super busy with other 1.18 work, so she volunteered to work on that, and then I touched up a bit afterwards. But yeah, that was her project for the most part.
do we have an official name for him? Because with all the different servers, like, because so many people like encountered him by accident, because a lot of us
Mhm.
were just playing, and then all of a sudden it's just like, what is this? And it's something you can't really encounter. It's just an ambiance in the background. And I like that part of it because, I'm running as fast as I can towards him and I can't get any closer. I
Mhm.
thought that was great. But like some people are like, some people call him Dave. Some people call him
Yeah.
Yeah.
Temporal God. I've learned to just call him the Time Giraffe. So, like, do we
Time
have an
giraffe. I
official
like that
name
one.
for him or not really?
um
Or one that we're
Kind
not
of.
giving away yet?
Not ready yet,
Okay,
but
okay,
yeah.
okay.
We sort of uh call it a super mech internally, just as a easy way to refer to it. It's also in the files, it's called the Thunderlord. Um,
Ooh.
but neither of those are necessarily the story name.
Okay.
So we think we love the whole Dave joke in,
Yeah.
in the team.
I have no idea where that even came from, but now anytime it comes up, like because I read that and then I was in my stream and I was just like, guys, it's Dave. And I'm like, that's so dumb, but I'm gonna keep it because it's
Yeah.
Yeah, I
random.
would love to know who wound up accidentally coming up with that name or whatever. Like the
Yeah.
actual origin of Dave. I would love to know that, but I have no idea what it is. I've looked around a bit, but couldn't find anything.
I can't even remember
Um,
where I saw it, but I know I saw the name Dave and I was just like, that's ridiculous. And I love it.
yeah.
But the trouble is, we all do call it Dave.
Yeah,
it's
And
sort of
now we
caught
do.
it's
on.
sort of
It caught
official at
Yeah,
on.
this
it
point.
did.
Yeah. But there'll be more for that later.
Mhm.
Yeah. Not prepared to share anything at this time.
Oh no, and to me that's half the fun too, because that means, and you guys have already made it very clear, more story, more music, more lore, more stuff is coming because this project's probably going to go on for as long as you guys still have some heart in it. So
Yeah.
things will keep going.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
still a lot more we want to do.
there are zero signs of stopping.
Awesome. Awesome. Anything left on your end, Ash?
No, I've covered everything I wanted to add. I'm still, I am still awe-stricken by this game, and the music, when I first heard that, and I started playing this game very early, I just fell in love with the music. I love your music, Hayden. And as for
Thank
the
you.
animation, it is superb,
Thank
absolutely
you.
superb. And I think a lot of the lore that's written in letters and books and stuff and diaries is very good. It's so well written that I find myself liking some characters and hating others. So
Thank
how
you.
can you hate someone in the past through a letter? Oh yes, because it's well written. So I really, really, I'm just amazed by the whole thing. I'm so glad you're all so enthusiastic. Keep going.
Keep going.
We will. And thank
For
you for
sure.
being, one of our longest term players from the early
Yeah,
days.
it is really encouraging to see someone remain interested for so long because I guess it's a sign that like the game has staying power. Like I remember early on, I was super worried that anyone who joined, I guess, the community in the early stages would just be gone in a month or two because I was worried the game didn't have enough to offer. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just really exciting to see people continue to be advocates of the game and to enjoy it and just be around in the community.
Oh, I think a lot of us have been here a very long time.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, a lot of the early players have stayed around, which, like I said, is just that's so cool to see,
Yeah.
and super encouraging.
I like that
It-
the game kind of wants you to kind of encourages you to want to come back eventually too. Because I know for a bit there, like our first server launched, I think 3 years ago now, and we put an extensive amount of hours into that one. And then I had to take a break from it because, you know, after a while you do get hit with just like where you feel like you don't know where to go from there.
Hmm.
So I hit that point with that server and I did not want to progress any farther. And then like a year and a half goes by and then I got a chance to start like demoing the game for people to see it so that they could see what Vintage Story was supposed to be. And I found myself relearning the game again because enough updates had happened between that year and a half that I'm just like, hold on, I don't get 2 more knife blades anymore. Hey.
Yeah.
And then I was like searching more and I'm like, hey, obsidian's a lot rarer now. What happened here? So I was suddenly like realizing the game's different now. And like it was just enough different that I felt like I need to come back and see what else has changed so that I could start relearning the game again. And I'm glad I did. And I'm glad I did it in a bit more of a harder version too, because it's a whole different perspective from the harder version.
It's a fiendishly complex game, actually.
It is.
It is fiendishly complex. People look at it and think, oh, it's simple. It's not. It's a very sophisticated game now. I love it.
It's funny. I remember early on, we got a sudden influx of players, and we were all like, "Where do these guys come from?" And we tracked it down, and they came from the Dwarf Fortress forums, and we were all like, "That makes sense." They like complex games.
For those who don't know, Dwarf Fortress is among the most complex games out there.
I love people who start off and say, and you're on a server with them and say, look, do you want a bit of help or advice, you know? And oh no, I'll just do it. I'm very intuitive. Good luck with that.
By the 12th death message, they usually say, okay, how do you play this game?
Yeah. Oh dear. But it's lovely seeing new players come in all the time.
It is.
And watching them all become wolf bait. It's fun.
It's a rite of passage.
It
is a rite of passage.
There are sort of things like that where it's like, okay, well, you know, we should be trying to make the new player experience more intuitive. And maybe we need to be toning down the wolves. But then exactly you have on the other end, it's like, okay, well, that's also kind of the game though. So
it kind of is.
It's tough to change that.
I have to say though, I do always start in a warm climate, because if I start anywhere north, I'm absolute bear bait. Every time I start where there are bears, they kill me and I can't get past, you know, spawning.
We are adjusting the bears a bit. The footsteps definitely, at the very least, we can make them less of stealth bears.
Yeah.
I think the first thing you know is when you this bloody great growl in your ear and then it kills you.
Yeah.
It's just, you know.
And the fact that even during hunter class, it still is as fast as you.
They're very fast.
That's not okay.
Okay, but you want realism though.
I know.
And they are.
And that is very much what you get with the bears. And the fact that they can scale 4-block high structures for the most part. So it's just like, okay, yep, this just went, you know, I thought wolves were the worst of my luck. Nope, it got worse. I can handle wolves.
I love bears. That's why they keep coming to me, unfortunately.
I will say one thing you can do to kind of escape bears is build I forget what the stone path is called that raises your movement speed. I don't think it buffs the bear's movement speed, so it lets you kind of run away from them.
I think that's right.
No, dig a 2 deep hole, crouch in it and kill them from underneath.
Yep.
Yeah.
Some people have figured out how to juke the bears. Thank you. Do you know what I did find funny? The bears can climb 3-block high structures, but they can't jump a hoon fence.
Quite right.
Okay. The fences are specifically made to, like, nothing can climb over it.
That killed me.
Funny.
But I was just like, because I remember we put up the fence and I looked at that and I went, okay, guys, time to find out if the bears just vault over this and we're all about to die, or if this actually works. And when the bear stopped at the fence, I was like, oh my God.
It's a deep sigh of relief.
It was just like, oh my God, guys, we're not going to die today, because we've all been using dirt, because in early game you use dirt to protect yourself, and the bears were just like,
Yeah.
And once we were just like, okay, let's try fence and see if fence will do something. And the minute that bear stopped at that fence, I was like, wow, like I was finding God through the entire experience. I didn't know. Because when you see a bear charging, there's only a couple thoughts going through your head. It's like I either die or we find out what happens. And well, the fence was that was a great moment in that stream too. It's just like time to find out what's going to happen.
Oh. Oh dear.
All
You
right.
can tell how enthusiastic we all are.
And looking forward to more.
It's awesome.
Too. Well, I don't think I have anything else to ask. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
Nothing really comes to mind. I think we covered a lot.
I'd say we've crossed about 1,000
Yeah.
today, way more than I expected, but thank you. This was a lot of, even if people aren't looking for music development or animation development, just the thought process and the projects themselves are just something fun to share with people, because then they see the passion in the project. They say, oh, I don't understand music theory, but I understand why he enjoys making the music so much. Like there's plenty to it.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting us on. It's been awesome to talk about this stuff.
For sure, it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
And thanks for coming with me, Ash, because I'm sure there's very few people we could have brought on that are half as enthusiastic about this game.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, so we'll go ahead and end it here. And thank you, everybody, for who has joined us on the podcast. Join us next time. Hopefully we'll have you guys on again, and maybe we can convince other devs to come on as well, because I certainly could see a part 2 of this coming along, especially if we see more updates and progression in any of the story, things that we're willing to talk about, and things that maybe we should kind of keep more for the discovery side of things. So thank you guys, and have a very good day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.